Let's be honest, we are all constantly swimming in a sea of headlines about our health. One day coffee is good for you, the next it's bad. But behind every single one of those headlines is a scientific study. So today, we're going to pull back that curtain. We're going to make the thinking behind that science totally transparent, giving you the tools to figure out what's real and what's just noise.
So, picture this. You're scrolling through your feed, maybe having your morning coffee, and bam! A headline like this stops you in your tracks. It's pretty alarming, right? But here's the thing. The real question isn't what they found, but how they found it. The strength of that claim, whether you should take it seriously, it all comes down to the design of the study itself.
So to sort this all out, we're going to climb what epidemiologists call a ladder of evidence. We're going to start at the bottom with the simplest kind of study and work our way up to the really powerful ones. And along the way, we're going to focus on the critical limitations of each one. By the end of this, you'll have a brand new framework for looking right through those headlines.
Okay, first up, the very first rung on our ladder, the case series. You can think of this as the starting point, where a medical mystery often begins. It's where doctors on the front lines first start to notice something, well, something odd. A case series is basically a collection of interesting stories. A doctor might notice, that's weird. I've seen 5 patients with this really rare cancer, and they all worked at the local chemical plant. The case series just describes these patients. It doesn't prove anything, but it's that crucial first observation, that little spark that makes someone say, you know what, I think something might be going on here.
But, and this is a huge but, it has a fatal flaw. There is no comparison group. Zero. We have a group of people who are sick, but we have no idea if that thing we noticed, like working at the chemical plant, is actually unusual. Maybe lots of people in that town work there. Without a healthy group to compare them to, we just don't know. So a case series can give you a fascinating question, a hypothesis, but it has absolutely no power to test it.
All right, let's move up to the next rung on our ladder. This is the cross-sectional study. And this design is important because it introduces that one crucial element we were just missing, a comparison.
And this is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's like taking a single snapshot of a big crowd of people. Imagine we go out and survey 1,000 people, all on the same day. We ask them 2 things. Do you have heart disease right now? And what's your cholesterol level right now? We measure both things at the exact same moment in time. This gives us a great look at prevalence, how much of a disease is out there in the population today.
But taking a snapshot like that creates a massive classic problem. If we find that people with heart disease tend to have high cholesterol, we are completely stuck. It's the ultimate chicken or the egg scenario. I mean, did the high cholesterol come first and eventually lead to heart disease? Or did having heart disease, or maybe the medicines people take for it, somehow raise their cholesterol? Because we measured everything at once, we have no idea which came first. And without knowing that, we can't even begin to talk about what causes what.
So, how in the world do you solve that timing problem? Well, our next study design, the case control study, has a really clever trick up its sleeve. It tries to solve the mystery by working backwards, kind of like a medical detective arriving at the scene of the crime.
The logic here is pretty brilliant, actually. You start at the end of the story. First, you find a group of people who already have the disease you're interested in. Those are your cases. Next, you find a very similar group of people who don't have the disease. Those are your controls. And then you ask both groups the exact same question. Okay, looking back, what were you exposed to? If the cases were exposed to something way more often than the controls, well, you might have just found a major clue. But this super clever design has 2 infamous weak spots. 2 villains that can totally mess up the investigation. First, there's selection bias. That's when you accidentally pick the wrong group of people to compare against. And then there's recall bias, which comes down to the simple fact that our memories, well, they aren't perfect video recorders. Let's see how these can wreck a study. Okay, here is a perfect, real-life example of selection bias. Back in the 1920s, a researcher named Raymond Pearl had a theory that tuberculosis might somehow protect people from getting cancer. So he compared cancer patients to a control group of other patients at the same hospital. And he found less TB in the cancer group. But here was the problem. His control group was terrible. The hospital he worked at was a major treatment center for tuberculosis, so his healthy control group was actually filled with people who had TB, making their rate of tuberculosis artificially sky-high. His conclusion was dead wrong, all because he picked the wrong comparison group. Now here's a more modern example that caused a whole lot of confusion for years. A really famous 1981 study seemed to find this shocking link between drinking coffee and getting pancreatic cancer. But look closely at the controls. They were other patients from the same doctor's offices,
and many of them had stomach problems or other GI issues. Now, what's one of the first things people do when they have an upset stomach? They cut way back on coffee, so the control group had an unusually low amount of coffee drinkers, which made the regular coffee habits of the cancer patients look incredibly high by comparison. The entire finding was probably just an illusion created by this subtle selection bias.
So the second big villain is recall bias. And this isn't about people being dishonest, it's just about how human memory works. Imagine a study looking at whether getting an infection during pregnancy could cause birth defects. A mother whose child was born with a malformation, she's a case, has probably spent countless hours replaying every single day of her pregnancy, desperately searching for any possible cause. The mother of a healthy child, a control, simply hasn't had any reason to do that. That difference in how intensely they search their memories can create what looks like a link, even if there's nothing there at all.
All right, it's time to climb to the top of our observational ladder. This is the cohort study. And this design is so powerful because it avoids many of the pitfalls we've just been talking about by completely flipping the script.
So here's the fundamental shift, the big change. A case control study, as we saw, starts with sick people and looks backward into the past. A cohort study does the exact opposite. It starts with healthy people. It figures out who's exposed to what, and then it follows everybody forward in time to see who gets sick. This is a total game changer because it completely eliminates recall bias. Nobody has to remember anything from years ago because you're tracking it as it happens.
This is really the most intuitive way to study a disease. You find a large group of smokers and a large group of non-smokers. These are your cohorts. And crucially, everyone is healthy at the start. Then you just follow them. You check in every year for, say, 20, 30 years, and you simply count who develops lung cancer in each group. It's so powerful because you know for a fact that the exposure, the smoking, came before the disease.
So if cohort studies are so amazing, why don't we just use them for everything? Well, their limitations aren't about logic, they're about the real world. Following thousands of people for decades is incredibly, mind-bogglingly expensive and takes a very, very long time. And if you're studying a super rare disease, forget it. You might need to follow millions of people just to see a handful of cases. And there's another big problem, loss to follow-up. People move, they stop answering calls, they just drop out. If more people drop out from one group than the other, it can seriously skew your results.
Okay, we have climbed the ladder of evidence. Now, let's put all of this together and turn it into a practical guide you can use the next time one of those health headlines grabs your attention.
So here it is, our entire journey in one simple table. Remember, we started with the case series, just a simple observation, but its fatal flaw was having no comparison group. Then the cross-sectional study gave us a comparison with a snapshot in time, but it couldn't solve that chicken or egg problem. Case control studies tried to fix that by looking backward, but they ran into those two big villains, selection and recall bias. And finally, the powerful cohort study gave us a clear timeline from cause to effect, but at a huge cost in time, money, and complexity.
And I think this quote really gets to the heart of it. The goal isn't to find the one single perfect study that gives us the final answer, because that study doesn't exist. The real goal is to understand the trade-offs, to see the potential flaws and errors that are built into every single design.
And that's really the crucial takeaway here. Each of these study designs is a tool in a toolbox. You wouldn't use a screwdriver to hammer in a nail. In the same way, you use a case control study for a quick look at a rare disease, but you need a cohort study to really build a strong case that one thing causes another. Understanding the limits of each tool, that's what separates someone who just passively accepts headlines from someone who can critically read and understand them.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. The next time a headline about coffee or red wine or the latest superfood pops up on your screen, I want you to try something. Instead of just asking, what did the study find? Ask yourself, how did they find it? Because understanding the limits of the tool they used will fundamentally change the way you read the news forever.